The new girl in the lab is a genius. When we run experiments, she always gets the data one step ahead of me. When we write papers, she always manages to publish a second before I do. So I decided to just completely check out. I started pouring vodka into test tubes and inserting my headshots into PowerPoint presentations. Everyone lost their minds, begging me to get back to my research. The first phase of the experiment was over. Once again, my results were a perfect match for Lily's. From the citations to the procedural steps, even the data, down to the same 2 decimal places, was identical. Professor Kane's face darkened as he threw both reports onto the table. Well, who copied who? His sharp gaze fell on the two of us, his tone colder than I'd ever heard it. I stared at the 2 nearly identical reports on the table, my brow furrowed in confusion. I couldn't make sense of it. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I designed and completed this experiment entirely on my own. I did not plagiarize. So, you're saying I copied you, Chloe? Lily stood to the side, her eyes red and her voice trembling, though she was trying hard to stay composed. That look of barely contained grievance was devastatingly effective. She said, "But you have your own private lab, and you always lock the door when you're working. You treat us all like thieves. There's no way I could get in, let alone steal your data." Her words silenced the murmuring room. Because what Lily said was true. I've been seen as a genius my whole life, blessed with a nearly photographic memory and an uncanny ability for deduction. I skipped 5 grades in elementary and middle school, took the SATs as a sophomore and got into MIT, and was recruited into Professor Kane's prestigious research institute the moment I stepped on campus. Now, on the verge of finishing my master's, I'm not even 20 years old. In my years at the institute, I've published countless papers in top-tier journals like SCI, SSCI, and EI. To ensure I could work with total concentration, I applied for and received a private lab. I always keep it locked. It's safe to say that no one, not even Professor Kane, could get into my lab without my knowledge. Lily definitely couldn't. Everyone else realized this too. They exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to say. One of the younger grad students timidly spoke up. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding? It's not unheard of for experimental data to overlap. Their research topics are similar, and they use the same source data and materials. It could just be a coincidence." She meant to calm Professor Kane down, but her words only made him angrier. Once or twice is a coincidence. 3 or 4 times is also a coincidence. His eyes were like daggers. Ever since the semester started, Chloe's and Lily's experimental data have consistently matched. If everyone is getting the exact same results, why do I even need this many people in my institute? Furthermore, this experiment was specifically designed by the university to select a candidate for the Apex Challenge. The probability of identical results is 1 in 10 million. A coincidence of that magnitude happening in my institute is impossible. Professor Kane is a research fanatic, almost pathologically dedicated to science. Seeing him this furious, no one dared to say another word. The atmosphere grew cold, punctuated only by Lily's soft, almost inaudible sobs. Suddenly, someone had an idea. The system automatically generates timestamps on the experiment logs. Why don't we just check who got the data first? Since Professor Kane was convinced someone had plagiarized, whoever finished the experiment first would be cleared. The proposal quickly gained everyone's approval. Professor Kane squinted, his gaze sweeping over Lily and me. "What do you two think?" I nodded. Lily straightened her back, tilting her chin up defiantly. "I agree. It wasn't me who cheated." To be fair, Professor Kane randomly picked 2 of the senior students and had them bring out their laptops. He told Lily and me to log into the system separately to check our experiment logs. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Lily and I sat on opposite sides of the aisle. The only sound in the large institute was the clatter of our fingers typing in our passwords. For some reason, the campus Wi-Fi was incredibly slow today. The page kept refreshing but wouldn't fully load. I clenched my fists at my sides, a strange sense of dread creeping in. I could guarantee that I had produced every bit of that data through my own step-by-step work. But after the last few bizarre coincidences, I couldn't help but feel a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Just as Professor Kane said, ever since Lily joined the institute, nearly every experiment she'd done had produced results identical to mine. And I couldn't figure out why. With a soft chime, the page finally loaded. I dug my nails into my palm and found the log for the final experiment. I clicked it open. It showed that the final timestamp for this experiment was October 22nd, 11:08 and 35 seconds p.m. 5 nights ago, in the middle of the night. I let out a sigh of relief. The time was correct. The junior students behind me gasped. "Chloe, you're amazing. You finished the experiment that early." I nodded. Although this experiment was incredibly difficult, I had done similar work before and knew which pitfalls to avoid. I made almost no mistakes and finished it quickly. I couldn't believe anyone could have done it faster. Especially not Lily, a novice who couldn't even tell a test tube from a beaker when she first joined the institute. I lifted my eyes and glanced coolly at Lily. As if sensing my gaze, she turned her head, a flicker of a smirk and a hint of provocation in her eyes. My heart sank. My intuition screamed that something was wrong. Sure enough, the next second I heard her say, "Professor, my system is loaded." The final timestamp on my experiment log is October 22nd, 11:07 and 35 seconds p.m. The moment she spoke, every eye in the room snapped from her to me. Their gazes were filled with disbelief, shock, and suspicion. One was 11:08. The other was 11:07. Even an idiot could tell which came first. My lab mates, who had been so confident in me just moments ago, were now speechless. I started to speak, but Lily cut me off. "Chloe, I know you don't like me." A tear rolled perfectly down her cheek, clinging to her skin as she looked at me with an expression of pure hurt and confusion. "But you can't just copy my experimental data. Do you have any idea how hard I worked to get into Professor Kane's institute? I poured my heart and soul into this data, repeating glyc experiments over and over." She sobbed. "If you wanted it, you could have just asked me. I would have shared it with you. I really would have." "But why did you have to steal it?" "I did not." Her accusations were getting more and more ridiculous. I shot back. "This data is my own work. I didn't steal anything." Lily just cried harder, shaking her head. Things were at a standstill again. The other students fell silent. They had assumed that even if there was plagiarism, it couldn't possibly be me. But now, the objective evidence of the experiment logs was right there for everyone to see. The fact was, Lily had finished the experiment before me. It was impossible for her to have copied me. People started whispering. Did Chloe really copy Lily's results? I can't believe she's that kind of person. Isn't she supposed to be a genius? She's published so many papers. Maybe she plagiarized all of them. You know how it is, once you start, it gets easier. Looks like she finally got caught. Professor Kane's expression grew uglier by the second. My face went cold. I looked at Lily. "The timestamp on the log alone doesn't prove I stole your data." "Yes, but..." She bit her lip, hesitating. My eyes narrowed as I stared at her. "But what?" "But as soon as I finished the experiment, I exported the paper and sent it to you to compile, Chloe." I frowned, not immediately understanding what she was talking about. Then I watched as she logged into her DMs and pulled up her chat history with me. There, in black and white, was a message showing that at 11:07 p.m. on October 22nd, she had sent me the experiment report. I snapped my head up and met her tear-stained face, but deep in her eyes, I saw a flicker of triumphant satisfaction. Then, she gave a slight tug at the corner of her mouth, closed the window, and put on a helpless smile. I sent the report to Chloe at 11:07, and she finished her experiment at 11:08. It's just too much of a coincidence. But if Chloe says she didn't steal it, then I guess she didn't. She said, "I don't have as much seniority or experience as she does here. No one would believe anything I say anyway." I wanted to explain, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? That I didn't open the file right after she sent it? That when I was compiling everyone's work later, I just downloaded the files without looking at them? The more I said, the guiltier I would sound. All right. Everyone dismiss. Professor Kane didn't give me a chance to explain. His face was a thundercloud, his cold eyes fixed on me. He waved his hand dismissively and turned to leave. After that incident, almost everyone decided I was a thief who plagiarized others' work. My standing in the institute plummeted. The junior students did a complete 180 in how they treated me. Professor Kane started to ignore me and sideline me in every way possible. Not only did he suspend all my projects and hand them off to others, but he also took back the experiment I was about to wrap up. The reason? My character was questionable. If I didn't have several patents pending review, I probably would have been kicked out already. In stark contrast, Lily's reputation as a genius spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire campus had heard about the brilliant new student in the institute. When running experiments, she was always one step ahead of me with the data. When writing papers, she always managed to publish a second before I did. What kind of genius is Chloe? It's all hype. Lily, you're the real genius. Yeah, we all heard about how Chloe copied your data. I bet she got where she is today because of all the resources she was given. She probably stole achievement from others, too. Not like you, Lily, you did it all on your own. I had just reached the entrance to the institute when I overheard a few people clustered around Lily. By the way, Lily, is it you or Chloe who's going to the Apex Challenge? Hearing the name of the competition, I froze. The Apex Challenge was a national science and research competition held every 3 years. Only the top 50 universities in the country were eligible to participate. Each school selected its most talented and promising student to compete. Winning meant not only hundreds of millions in research funding for the Students' Institute, but also a boost in the university's national ranking. As I stood there dazed, the group inside spotted me. The junior students' smiles vanished, replaced by scowls. It was Lily who, with a sweet curve of her lips, said, "Chloe, you're back just in time. Let's go to the Apex Challenge together." I frowned. I thought there was only one spot. Lily nodded, glancing at me meaningfully. She fidgeted with the hem of her shirt and mumbled, "There is only one spot. Professor Kane is still mad at you about what happened, so he's sending me. But don't be upset, Chloe. I'll talk to him and ask him to get another spot for us." She said, "I know it hasn't been easy for you to get this far. You shouldn't be written off just because of 1 or 2 mistakes. We can go together." I let out a cold laugh. Before I could reply, one of the students standing next to her jumped in. "Lily, you're just too kind. You're being taken advantage of and you don't even see it. If you ask me, you should keep this opportunity for yourself. After all, some people are repeat offenders. Who knows if she'll try to copy you during the competition." After they had their say, Lily slowly spoke up to quiet them. "Don't talk like that. Chloe isn't that kind of person. She just made a mistake, and she's already learned her lesson." Watching them work together to paint me as the villain was so absurd it was almost funny. I said, "I'm not planning on joining the Apex Challenge. You can go by yourself." Given Lily's hostility towards me, I expected her to be thrilled, ready to break out the champagne. Instead, her eyes went wide, as if she'd been struck by lightning. Beyond the disbelief, a flash of panic crossed her face. "Why aren't you going?" I frowned, finding her reaction odd. "I'm just not. What's with all the questions?" I didn't want to get tangled up with her, so I turned to leave. But she grabbed my arm. "No, you have to go. What am I supposed to do if you don't?" Her grip was surprisingly strong, and I hissed in pain. Realizing she might have overreacted, she loosened her hold and tried to backtrack. "I just think it's such an important competition. It would be a shame if you didn't participate. Professor Kane has high hopes for you too. You should really go." I said, "I'll talk to Professor Kane myself. I'm not participating in this competition." Seeing that I wouldn't budge, Lily tried to play the victim card, attempting to guilt-trip me. "Are you still holding a grudge because Professor Kane gave me your lab? I can give it back to you, okay? Don't be childish. This competition is so important. How could you not want to participate? You must still be mad at me." Yes, after it was proven that Lily finished her experiment before me and couldn't have copied my work, Professor Kane had transferred all of my resources to her, including my private lab. His reasoning was that only a true genius deserved to have it. Hearing her say this, The people standing nearby couldn't take it anymore. They shot me nasty looks, full of open mockery and contempt. Chloe, there's a limit to how stubborn you can be. If it weren't for Lily being so kind and not pressing charges, do you really think you'd get off with just losing a stupid lab? Lily is begging you like this for your own good. Do you know she's been so worried about this that she hasn't even been able to focus on her experiments? And it's all your fault. At that, I raised an eyebrow. An idea began to form. I looked at Lily. You haven't been running experiments these past few days either? Her eyes darted around nervously. She stammered out a yes. I said, my voice full of meaning. What a coincidence. I haven't either. As Professor Kane had said, the probability of our last experiment's results overlapping was 1 in 10 million. It was practically impossible for that to happen here. And yet, before that, my data and Lily's had matched up multiple times. I could swear I never copied anything. Afterward, I checked the experiment logs. Every single time, Lily's completion time was exactly 1 minute earlier than mine. Not 59 seconds. Not 1 minute and 1 second. Exactly 1 minute, on the dot. It was as if she had a crystal ball, able to see exactly what results I would get 1 minute in the future. It was all too strange. To figure out what was going on, I hadn't done any experiments for the past few days. And now Lily had stopped working too. There was no way that was a coincidence. I lowered my gaze, thinking for a few seconds. So Lily, you really want me to compete with you? Seeing my attitude soften, Lily's eyes lit up. Of course. You're my inspiration, Chloe. If you don't participate, then I won't either. She said it with such conviction. Everyone who heard her was moved by her passion. Only I knew the real reason why. Since that was the case, I nodded. All right then. I'll compete with you. Really? A look of pure joy flashed across Lily's face. A thrill she could barely contain. She grabbed my hand tightly. Then let me be the first to wish you good luck in the competition. I smiled. Oh, I'm sure it will be. With Lily's insistent demands and her threats to withdraw, Professor Kane had no choice but to request an additional spot. The day my application was submitted, everyone was praising Lily. They said she was magnanimous, willing to forgive and forget, and that I should be eternally grateful to her. I paid no attention to the gossip. I had a theory. There had to be something about Lily, something that allowed her to know what I was going to do 1 minute in the future. All she had to do was do it first, and it would look like I was the one copying her. That's why she was so desperate for me to compete with her. Otherwise, with her shaky hands that could barely hold a pair of tweezers, she'd only embarrass herself. To test my theory, the next day, at the end of an experiment, I intentionally recorded one piece of data incorrectly. When the time was right, I got up to leave. Just as I reached Professor Kane's office, the door to the lab next door swung open. Lily emerged, holding a stack of papers. She gave me an innocent-looking smile, but her eyes were full of provocation. Chloe, let me go first. I still have a lot to take care of in my lab. Unlike you, you're so free these days. It won't matter if you're a little late, right? I shrugged and took my hand off the doorknob. Be my guest. Lily's lips curled into a smug smile, and she strode arrogantly into the office. I waited quietly by the door. 2 minutes later, Professor Kane's angry roar erupted from within. Are you a moron? You can't tell the difference between 0.1 and 0.01. If your eyes are that bad, go get them fixed. This isn't a vision correction center. If you can't even read a decimal point, what are you doing running experiments? His shouts were interspersed with Lily's crying. The other students heard the commotion and gathered around. Chloe, what's going on? I held up my hands. I don't know. Sounds like Lily recorded her experimental data wrong. Just as I finished speaking, the office door opened. A tear-streaked face appeared. Lily had never been yelled at since she joined the institute. But now her eyes were red and swollen, her hair was a mess, and the report in her hands was crumpled. It looked like it had been thrown on the floor, and then picked back up. As soon as she came out, everyone crowded around her. Some offered comfort, others asked what had happened. But she just stared at me, her eyes red and fixed. She rushed over in a few steps, snatched the report out of my hands, and flipped to the last page. Suddenly, all her frustration and resentment found an outlet. She pointed at a number on the page and demanded, "Why did you get this wrong? Why weren't you more careful? Were you trying to sabotage me on purpose?" Hearing her, everyone looked completely baffled. I put on a confused expression. "Lily, what are you talking about? What did I get wrong?" Her finger jabbed at the paper, making it crinkle. "This should be 0.1, but you wrote 0.01. If you hadn't gotten it wrong, Professor Kane wouldn't have yelled at me." She glared at me hatefully. I pretended to lean in and look at where she was pointing, then let out an, "Oh," and tapped my head. "You're right, I did mess that up. Thanks for pointing it out, Lily. Otherwise, I definitely would have gotten chewed out. I'll go change it right now." "But," I said, changing the subject, "why would you say I was trying to sabotage you? And I haven't even gone in to present my report yet. How did you know I made a mistake here? Did you make the same mistake?" I covered my mouth in mock surprise. What a coincidence. There are very few right answers but millions of wrong ones. Of course, Lily wouldn't dare admit she made the exact same mistake. Facing everyone's suspicious and curious stares, she stammered, Of course not. I got yelled at for something else." Then she regained her composure. "But your careless attitude towards your experiments is affecting me. Since Professor Kane was kind enough to give you a chance, you should treasure it." She glared at me, her jaw tight. "Don't make such a basic mistake again." I grinned and agreed. "Yes, you're right. I'll definitely be more serious with my experiments from now on." "Yeah, right." After confirming my theory and discovering that Lily was an idiot who couldn't even spot an obvious decimal error, I went into full-on slacker mode. Instead of solutions and reagents, I poured vodka into my test tubes. Instead of charts and graphs, I inserted photos of famous academics into my presentation materials. I mixed truth with fiction, and Lily couldn't tell the difference. She started getting yelled at every other day. Professor Kane's roars echoed through the entire institute. After I once again poured leftover soda into a petri dish, causing Lily to get another earful, she finally snapped. She slammed open my office door and stormed up to me. In less than 2 weeks, she looked like a completely different person. She used to be like a carefree princess, basking in her reputation as a genius, effortlessly producing results. Now, after constant setbacks and criticism, her face was gaunt and pale, etched with fine lines and exhaustion. Her spirit seemed to have been drained, and she radiated a gloomy aura. She stood menacingly in front of my workbench, her face contorted and ferocious, her eyes practically shooting fire at me. "Chloe, you already know, don't you?" As she spoke, her venomous gaze locked onto me, like a snake watching from the shadows, hissing and ready to strike. I blinked innocently. "Lily, what are you talking about? I don't understand." I met her chilling glare without flinching, even managing to tilt my head back, straighten my posture, and force a smile. The suspicion in Lily's eyes gradually faded. She stood at my workbench for so long that she started attracting attention. "Lily, what's wrong?" The student who was closest to Lily walked over, a worried look on her face. Lily's aggressive demeanor vanished. She covered her face with her hands, and tears instantly streamed down. She shot me a resentful look and choked out, "I've just noticed that Chloe has been really careless with her experiments lately. We have to present our data at the competition soon, and I just wanted to persuade her to take it seriously." Hearing this, the person next to her shot me a disdainful look. Why are you even bothering with her? Her past achievements were all plagiarized. Now that she has no one to copy, of course she can't do the work. Exactly. Just focus on your own stuff. I think she's just here to fill a spot. "No," Lily declared righteously. "I stand with Chloe." Then she turned to me. "Chloe, if you're going to keep slacking, then I'll slack off with you." The others panicked. "You can't do that. Lily, you're so talented, you're sure to win an award this time. Slacking off with her would be such a waste." Lily wiped her tears and shook her head, not saying a word. But her expression was resolute. Seeing that their persuasion was failing, everyone turned their fire on me. "Chloe, you're being really unreasonable. If you're not going to do your own work properly, why do you have to drag others down with you?" I almost laughed at their one-sided tirade. Who am I dragging down? You're dragging Lily down, of course. The girl closest to Lily stepped forward. Didn't you just hear her? If you don't work seriously, Lily won't either. Others chimed in. Chloe, don't be so selfish. Lily is the hope of our institute right now. If Lily doesn't win an award, it'll be your fault. Once they'd said their piece, Lily wiped her tears. Don't pressure Chloe. Lily, you're just too kind. Some people don't appreciate the chances they're given. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. They went on, practically trying to grind me into the dirt. Seeing that their little performance was about over, I smiled at Lily. All right, seeing as you're so sincere, I realize I've made a mistake. I'll focus on my experiments from now on. I won't make any more mistakes. After the torment of the past few weeks, Lily was clearly much more cautious. She looked at me skeptically. Are you serious? I raised my hand and swore. I, Chloe, guarantee that I will conduct my experiments properly for the duration of the Apex Challenge. If not, I'll quit Professor Kane's institute. For the next few weeks, I made no more mistakes in my experiments. Every single data set was nearly perfect. Professor Kane showered her with praise, openly declaring that she was a shoo-in for the prize. Lily finally relaxed. Her haggard look from the past few days vanished, and she was once again radiant and glowing. She practically had a spring in her step. Until the day of the competition. 1 minute before boarding, she came running up to me in a panic, saying she'd lost my presentation materials. I'm so sorry, Chloe, I really didn't mean to. Lily stood by the boarding gate, her eyes red, her voice cracking with a perfectly timed sob. She even squeezed out a couple of tears. I know I put both of our materials together. I don't know how yours went missing. My bag was just on that bench. I'll go check the security footage now. Don't worry, I'll find it for you. She turned as if to find an airport employee but was stopped by Professor Kane. Forget it. If it's lost, it's lost. Don't bother looking. Professor Kane glanced at me impatiently. It's not like it was anything important. As long as your materials are safe, that's all that matters. The rule for the Apex Challenge was simple. Regardless of whether you pre-registered, if you failed to submit your presentation materials on the day of the competition, you were automatically disqualified. During this time, Professor Kane had poured all his energy into Lily's experiment and paid no attention to my progress. I was happy to be invisible and never went to him for updates. So naturally, he assumed I hadn't produced anything worthwhile. Seeing Lily still crying, he frowned and snapped. That's enough. We're about to board. What's all this crying about? Lily timidly whispered, Yes, sir, and followed behind him. As she passed through the gate, she looked back at me, her eyes gleaming with the triumph of a successful scheme. I just smiled. I knew this was coming the moment she insisted on carrying my materials for me this morning. The rest of the trip went smoothly. After we landed, a car from the event organizers was waiting to pick us up. The first thing Lily did upon arriving at the venue was submit her materials. After personally watching the staff member log the file with her name on it, Lily let out a sigh of relief. She turned to me and said, Chloe, Professor Kane said my report is perfect. I'm definitely going to win. I nodded. Congratulations then. Perhaps my reaction was too calm, not the emotional outburst she was hoping for. She gritted her teeth. Don't you feel any regret? You worked so hard on that experiment for so long. If your materials hadn't been lost, you might have won an award too. I smiled at her, my voice still gentle, without a trace of anger. Professor Kane was right. It wasn't anything important. Nothing to regret. Lily's gaze lingered on my face, studying me. Her intuition told her something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She could never have imagined that I had already seen through her little trick. And even if she figured it out now, it was too late. Professor Kane was already off bragging to the professors from other competing universities, telling them how he had recruited another genius student. I oversaw Lily's experiment from start to finish. Every piece of data is perfect. Even I couldn't have done it better. I guarantee you, she's a lock for the gold medal in this competition. Professor Kane was a man with an almost fanatical devotion to research. If he said it was perfect, it must be true. Hearing this, the eyes of the other professors lit up, and they all started saying they wanted to visit Lily's lab to observe her work after the competition. Professor Kane laughed heartily, and had Lily go around greeting everyone with him. Lily's heart was pounding with anxiety, but she could only stand there and force a smile. Every so often, she would glance over at me. The calmer I appeared, the more it felt like 1,000 ants were crawling all over her insides. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She cornered me when I went to the restroom. "Chloe, you knew all along, didn't you?" It was the same question as last time, but she was much more certain now. I smiled lightly. "Knew what?" "Knew that you could predict what I'd do 1 minute in the future? Or knew that you secretly threw my report in an airport trash can?" Lily's head snapped up, her eyes fixed on me. "When did you know?" I shook the water from my hands, pulled out a paper towel, and leisurely dried them. "Let me think. It must have been when you were clinging to me, insisting I had to join the competition." Lily's face changed. "And you still agreed to compete? Weren't you afraid I'd keep predicting your moves?" I laughed out loud. "Afraid of what? You're so stupid you can't even tell when a decimal is in the wrong place. I could do anything and you'd believe it." Hearing this, she remembered my antics from right after I'd registered, and her eyes turned red with fury. "You did it on purpose." I nodded, admitting it freely. "Yes, I did it on purpose. And it wasn't just then. I'm doing it on purpose now, too. Why don't you take a guess what's written in that report you just submitted?" Lily scoffed. "Professor Kane reviewed the materials I submitted. How could it possibly?" Halfway through her sentence, her smile froze. Suddenly, her pupils contracted, and she stared at me in disbelief. I slowly spread a grin across my face. This morning, before leaving, I had added a small piece of code to the system, and then re-exported the experimental data. If I'm not mistaken, your report contains the newly exported data, right? Did you happen to see what it was? Lily was about to lose her mind. How could she know what it was? For weeks, Chloe had been working as diligently as an ox. Lily had just been copying her, not using her brain at all. How could she have guessed that Chloe would stab her in the back at the last minute? And she had been in such a rush this morning, she only had a few minutes. She didn't even glance at the data after exporting it. Looking at the smile on Chloe's face, a cold sweat broke out on her back, and her hands trembled at her sides. I took one last look at Lily's terrified face, then turned and walked away. Soon everyone knew what the newly exported data was. It wasn't data. It was just one sentence, copied and pasted thousands of times. This entire report was stolen by a fraud who can't do their own work. When the judges saw the report, they were so furious they practically convulsed and threw it out. A staff member, sensing something was terribly wrong, immediately notified Professor Kane. Professor Kane opened the cover page, and his vision went black. He almost fainted. He staggered to his feet, and in front of everyone, raised his hand and slapped Lily across the face. "What the hell is wrong with you? Where are the real materials?" Lily fell to the ground, and the fear she had suppressed to its absolute limit was suddenly unleashed. She screamed and cried. "It's all gone. Everything is gone. It was Chloe. Chloe set me up." Only then did Professor Kane remember me. "Chloe. Right, there's still Chloe." He rushed over to me. "Where are your materials? Hurry up and submit them." I held up my empty hands. "Lily lost them at the airport. You said it wasn't anything important and not to bother looking." Professor Kane's knees went weak. He was filled with a regret so deep it was crippling. In the end, Professor Kane and Lily were kicked out of the competition for malicious provocation. As for me, I had already returned to the university. The news that the institute had been barred from the next competition cycle reached the school even before Professor Kane did. He had sworn up and down that Lily would win, convincing the university to approve a ton of new lab equipment and space. He had even ordered tens of millions of dollars worth of instruments from abroad. His justification was that after the Apex Challenge, the institute would have hundreds of millions in research funding, more than enough to cover the costs. But now it had all turned to smoke. The hundreds of millions in funding were gone, but he was saddled with tens of millions in debt. Professor Kane hated Lily with a passion. He wanted to kill her. But he couldn't get anywhere near her now, because after returning from the competition, it was like Lily had mutated. Her mental state became erratic and unstable, and her body began to age at a visible rate. She kept muttering something about a system and points. Soon after, she was taken away by a group of people in white coats. For all I know, she's lying on a lab table being dissected right now. As for me, I kept my promise to her and left Professor Kane's institute. To be precise, the school dissolved Professor Kane's institute and disbanded its students. And with my real experimental data, I got my very own research institute.